Starting. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth day of SteelMint Engage 2.0, a 5-day webinar series. Through Engage 2.0, SteelMint is talking to industry leaders to learn their views about the current issues and challenges in the steel and related industries so that our clients can have better understanding on how each sector will unfold in the short to medium term. Your hosts for the webinar this evening are my colleague Nishtha Mukherjee, General Manager, Iron Ore and Scrap at SteelMint, and myself, Madhumita Mukherjee, Editor, SteelMint. We also have SteelMint's representative in China, Arthur Lee, who will act as a facilitator in this session. Welcome, Arthur, to the session.
Thank you.
We also take this opportunity to thank our esteemed sponsors for the event, NMDC, JSW Steel, and Tata Steel. We have a small video clip from NMDC, which will now play out for our audience.
Okay, so hello everyone.
I think the video has to play now.
Okay, so hello everyone.
Jing, just a minute. Actually, we need to play out a video.
Okay.
Just a second.
What do you find when you dig deep into the depths of the earth? We found a few rare elements, like commitment, compassion, a passion for perfection, and a vision for a stronger and better tomorrow. That is NMDC. It's not just a pioneering story of one of the world's finest iron ore producers, but a story of leadership with a human touch. From the depths of the earth to the bottom of hearts, NMDC has touched lives all around, creating wealth, building sustainable opportunities, and working towards impacting lives positively. NMDC, harnessing Earth's goodness.
Okay, to resume the session. In today's webinar, we will discuss the key drivers of the Chinese steel market in 2022. Our guest speaker this afternoon is Jing Zhang, analyst MySteel. China is the world's largest producer and consumer of steel. If ever there is a market mover of this magnitude, it is China all the way. Last year was a watershed for the Chinese steel industry in many ways. It undertook unprecedented production cut measures in a follow-up to its 2020 decision of peaking in carbon emissions by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. The country also faced an energy crisis in the form of a coal shortage, which led to further curtailing of production by energy-intensive industries, which included steel. However, China bounced back soon after with an increase in coal production to resolve the issue. The property market also faced challenges which impacted steel demand. But what exactly is the scenario in the steel and downstream sectors in China at present? And what is the way forward? Let us hear it from the expert without much ado. Let me present Ms. Jing Zhang, analyst at MySteel Iron Ore. Jing graduated from the University of Pompeu Fabra with a master's degree in advanced management. She has conducted projects that include analyses of the ferrous industry and macroeconomic indicators. Jing works as an analyst in the iron ore department of MySteel and is a dedicated commodity market and real estate industry analyst who specializes in mid and long-term projections of the ferrous and downstream industries. Her recent research has covered downstream steel demand, carbon trading, prefab development, iron ore market trends, and property policies. Over to you, Jing.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Jing Zhang, and it's very honored to present today. So now I'm going to share some of my views about the current steel market and how it goes in the next months. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so first, let's look at the steel demand from the manufacturing sector. The manufacturer investment has overrun the other sectors, like it is in the gray line. And if we look at the PMI index in February, we can see that the recovery of domestic demand has become the main factor and driving the rise of PMI in the manufacturing industry. And we saw it from the new order index. Meanwhile, although the export order index still in the reduced domain, but it's marginally improved by 0.6 percentage points to 49. The growth rate of price index in the manufacturing PMI still increased in February. It may promote further regulations on price control in the future. And due to increasing raw material prices, downstream enterprises have also been cautious on its restock. So we can see that the inventory index fell most recently. Okay, so if we break down to different sectors of factoring, the steel demand from automobile and shipbuilding industry may see significant increase in 2022. So for automobile industry, its production and sales volume all increased by more than 3%, despite the chip shortage. So moving into 2022, with the ease situation of pandemic, and also China is promoting the domestic chip production. So I believe it will show its results in the second half of this year. So the automobile production, I presume, may increase by 4.5% compared to last year. And under the and we should notice under the carbon emission control policy, I think the biggest growth in the automobile industry will be in the new energy car sector. So its output may increase by more than 50% in this year. So we can check here the new energy car is included in the passenger car last year, and in 2022, I think the new energy car volume will be up to 5 million tons. And for the shipbuilding factor, in 2021, the new shipbuilding orders increased by more than 80%. So we think the steel demand generated from these new orders may start to show in the second sector, in the second half of 2022. And if we see the steel consumption from machinery and home appliance industry, I believe it will probably remain flat in 2022. So first, if we see the machinery products, the excavator sales increased by about 5% last year in 2022. But we can see that this increase is mainly promoted by the export volume, which increased by 97% last year. but for the domestic demand, it dropped by 6% on year. So whether it's gonna the steel consumption from the machinery sector gonna increase is largely depend on the increase from ex-China market demand. And for home appliance industry, actually we check it with the other related index, and we think its sales growth is highly coordinated with the real estate sales. So, but it's in delay about 3 to 6 months. In 2021, the completed floor space rose by about 11%. And I think the home appliance demand from the completed building, it may start to show in March. So probably in March, the steel demand from home appliance may increase. And okay, and if we switch to the infrastructure side, until February, the SPB insurance has exceeded. Here I say it's like 700 billion RMB, but I have like checked with other database supporter, and we have come to a conclusion that until February, the SPB insurance has exceeded 800 billion RMB, which is more than 60% of the advanced SPB insurance for the whole year. So if we are checking the pipeline of the infrastructure projects accumulated in 2021, we believe the steel demand from infrastructure sector will increase in this year. But whether this increment from infrastructure side can offset the decreased steel demand from the real estate sector, it remains to be seen. Okay, and if we are looking at the real estate sales, firstly, we can see the real estate investment, land purchase, and newly started area all seeing a downturn in 2021, especially in the last 3 months. And from our research, it shows that March will be the first debt repayment for most real estate enterprises in 2022. And the second debt repayment peak will occur in July. So in this term, the real estate companies may accelerate their inventory sales and rush to complete the existing project. And if we check another indicator of steel consumption per person of China and developed compare it to the developed countries, we can see that it is difficult for the apparent consumption of crude steel per capita to rise for long term after it reaches 500 kilos per person. So in this sense, we can see that the China's the crude steel consumption per person is like quite high right now, and we think we can confirm nearly that it will decline probably in the future or in this year. And for the crude steel output, my scenario is that it will be within the range of remaining flat or decreasing by 20 million tons compared to last year. And the steel consumption is likely to remain the same according to our projection, and also we checked with WSA. So if under this projection, we expect the direct export volume of steel may be declined in 2022. It's actively declined because of the consumption and the supply gap between in the Chinese domestic market. But however, for the indirect export of steel products, we believe that the ex-China demand will likely to remain stable. Firstly, we have considered their GDP growth projection. And secondly, if we're looking at the supply chain from the ex-China countries, it remains unclear because of the mainly because of the pandemic impact. So the export demand of steel consuming products is likely, for China, is likely to remain firm. And if we are moving to the China steel making industry, we can see that the raw material demand can also be affected by the reduction of crude steel output. So our assumption is that if according to the 5-year plan of EAF output increment we can see that in 2022, our projection is that the EAF steel will likely to rise to about, is likely to occupy 12% of the total China's crude steel output. So in this projection, and if we are considering the China's crude steel output will be declined to 1.02 billion tons, then the peak iron output will be reduced probably by 14 million tons in 2022. So, and also if we are considering the cornerstone plan of increasing domestic iron ore supply, we expect the domestic concentrate is gonna rise by 6 million tons this year. We calculate all of these numbers, and then we think with cautious that the China's demand for imported iron ore may be reduced by 20 million tons in 2022. Okay, so and in terms of the reducing iron ore demand, and if we are looking at the iron ore supply, according to the production plans of the 4 major miners, in 2022, the imported iron ore supply will likely to remain loose. But for the shipments from non-mainstream miners, because currently the iron ore price is especially high, and we think under this high iron ore prices, the non-mainstream miners, they will continue to increase their shipments. And for coking coal and coke, with policies, firstly, that guarantee the stable supply in Inner Mongolia, Shanxi, and Shanxi is mostly in northern China. And also the policies that guarantee the price stability. We expect the tight supply of coal and coke may be marginally elevated in 2022. And if this happens, then maybe the coking coal and coke price will fall back. And because we are talking about the EAF crude steel output maybe increasing in this year, so if we are checking whether the scrap supply can fit to the increasing scrap consumption in 2022, actually we have talked with various authorities in the scrap industry, and we have our own calculation numbers. We think that the scrap supply will increase by 10 to 15 million tons per year. So by 2030, the increasing EAF steel proportion may and by increasing the EAF steel proportion, I think the resources of scrap may account for 40% of the steel output. It's just my personal assumption. Okay, and for the carbon peak and carbon neutrality policies in 2030 and 2060, we believe that the China steel industry, although it has been put off by 5 years before, it was 2025, and then now it's 2030 for the carbon peak. But the China steel industry maybe will definitely follow strict carbon emission control, as it's the steel industry is ranked the second place of China's carbon emission. And if we are thinking about the main difficulty that we are seeing right now to reach the carbon peak, we think for bearing the due pressure to reduce carbon emissions, and also for reach the ultra low emission targets for more than 80% of the production capacity, the investment from steel industry to reach all these requirements is difficult to estimate, but it's certainly a huge investment. Okay, so it's my presentation, and thanks for listening. I'm open to the questions.
Thank you, Jing. That was a very enlightening presentation.
Yeah, thanks.
And we have a few questions from our end.
Yeah,
Nishta, would you like to ask the first one?
yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So, Ms. Zing, first question from my end would be, you already elaborated on your outlook on China's crude steel production. You expect that China's crude steel production will fall in 2022. So, any expectation on steel exports also, if you could give, especially now when we are hearing since last couple of weeks that China has turned very active in exports, especially to Southeast Asia.
Okay, so actually, firstly, to answer the first question, what's my outlook on the crude steel production and exports? So actually, I have to say that there hasn't been any official document on the crude steel output reduction yet. But if we are considering the energy consumption per capita and also the carbon emission requirements in the carbon neutral policy, I assume that China's crude steel output will be probably reduced by 2% in this year. And also, if the steel consumption remains at 9.85 billion tons, so the export volume will be actively reduced in this case. So last year, the export volume was about 50 million tons, and maybe this year it will definitely decrease. And for the recently, we are hearing actually, yes, some of the steel products has been like rather popular in the steel exports, and actually the main product is HRC at present, and most of these exports, yes, it went to Southeast Asia countries, and firstly it is due to the high ex-China HRC price. It's because of the profit margin they can get to through export, but if we are thinking about how much the profit margin can be if they are exporting the semi steel products and also considering the carbon emission control that was forced on these steel mills, we can simply say that the export volume may not be increased significantly moving forward.
Okay, so maybe in next 1 month or 2 months, we can see an increase in the steel export volumes. But overall, if we look at on year-on-year basis, you expect that 2022 volumes of steel exports from China will be lower compared to that of 2021.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Is it possible to quantify by how much at this juncture? The drop in exports
for the exports.
Yes,
Yeah,
2022.
like if my personal view, I think it may be 10 million tons probably.
A drop of 10 million tons.
Yeah.
In 2020. Okay.
Okay, so next question related to iron ore demand that I would like to ask you, Ms. Singh, that how do you feel that increasing domestic iron ore output, as you mentioned about the rising iron ore concentrate output in China, how will that impact the demand of imported iron ore and pellets in China?
Okay, so if we're thinking about firstly, we are trying to increase the domestic iron ore output because we are trying to, how do you say, have sufficient iron ore supply, more sufficient iron ore supply from domestic market to be less depending on the imported iron ore. So that's when we come up with the cornerstone plan that is like released by the government. In the cornerstone plan, it's clearly stated that we expected that the domestic iron ore supply is gonna increase by 100 million tons in 5 years. So which means that even if the China's demand for iron ore remains the same, then averagely each year there will be more than 10 million tons of domestic iron ore fit for replacing some of the imported iron ore if they have similarly the Fe content or Fe grade.
Okay, just a follow-up question on that, Ms. Jing, that do you feel still high-grade ore will be in demand in China in the coming months, like lumps and pellets over that of fines and sinter?
Okay, so actually, we have like large demand for pellet and lump, especially in the winter heating season. And this year we also have the Winter Olympics, so that's why we have high consumption ratio of pellet and lump. But currently, because it's coming to an end, by the end of March, the winter heating season will be like finished, and then the Olympics will be finished. I think in this week as well. So probably the lump demand will fall, and as well as pellet. And I think if you wanted to check the relationship between our lump and pellet demand, and also the pellet premium or lump premium, I think currently under this like global situation, we don't think it has like much high relevance with the demand. Domestic demand is mainly affected, especially premium affected by the ex-China market. Yes.
Thanks, Ms. Jing.
Will China continue to remain active in pig iron and billets imports? What factors will be driving this?
Okay,
And
so
and if
yeah.
I may add, what sort of volumes would you be looking at in 2022?
Okay,
compared
so
to last year?
Firstly, in the past 2 weeks, actually, we have seen some increment in the billet imports. And the reasons behind this because the arbitrage window formed by the price difference between domestic and imported billet price. But however, according to our research, the cost of using import billet in the rolling plant is about 300 to 400 RMB per ton. So it's like rather high, it's higher than normal expectations. And actually yesterday we have seen a drop in the import billet volume already. So we don't think the recent active billet import will last much longer.
So you expect the volumes to taper down in both pig iron and billets both?
You mean the billet import and pig iron import?
Yes.
The pig iron import, it is rather different because it depends on whether the pig iron production in China can follow up with the steel demand. But because the pig iron process, the pig iron production normally is involved much of the carbon emission volume, but for the billet imports, we expected it's not gonna last longer like in this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So what sort of volumes drop in volumes are you looking at? If you could quantify that.
Currently, I couldn't really quantify that because it's like we don't think this situation will last longer. But I think it won't be like a much decrease as well.
What is the outlook on prices? What is the outlook on prices?
Sorry, what did you say?
I asked you what is the outlook on steel prices in China?
Steel prices in China right now, it's about like I think 4,900 RMB per ton currently.
Yeah. So I mean, going forward, I mean, how do you see price movements, price trends going forward? How do you expect the price movement to unfold? That is what I'm asking.
Okay. So for the steel prices, moving forward, we think is firstly, we expect some of the steel production to steel demand from downstream sectors to rise. I think in April or in May. And this one is definitely gonna drive up the steel prices. But if we are looking at the steel mills profit margin, it's relatively low. Currently, it's about like 100 RMB per ton to 200 RMB per ton. So if the raw material prices continue to rise, we think because of the so low profit margin and the cost control, they're gonna actively reduce their steel production. So it depends on whether the domestic, firstly, it depends on whether the domestic downstream demand will rise up, like surge, so that it can drive up the steel prices to enlarge, to widen the steel mills profit margin. And secondly, it also depends on whether the raw material price is gonna continue to rise as well.
Okay, but would it be possible to give a more definitive kind of an outlook in terms of, where prices are headed? If you could quantify a bit more.
And for the price, actually, currently it's quite sensitive to talk about. But I can suggest that whether it's also related with the steel inventories. And currently the steel inventory is like 500. It's like 5 million tons below the same period last year, or the normal level of previous years. So if they wanted to, there's not sufficient steel inventories, and there's also increasing downstream steel demand, the price definitely gonna rise. But how much it's gonna rise, I think it's quite sensitive for me to say in an open discussing meeting. Yes.
Nishra, you have a question?
I think one question that has been making rounds in last couple of weeks has been the NDRC checks. Ms. Jing, anything you want to elaborate on that how has it impacted the iron ore and coal prices? And what do you see is the outlook, especially for the imported iron ore prices, the recent NDRC checks that has been put in place?
Okay, I think the NDRC policies is definitely have put large pressure on the iron ore and coal prices. And we can see right now the China's domestic iron ore prices is significantly lower than that of the ex-China market. Actually, I think if we are checking the import profit margin of iron ore imported iron ore for China, why we didn't buy a lot of the seaborne iron ore cargoes is because the current import profit margin is 70 RMB per ton below the break-even point. So but as I present in the PowerPoint, in the first slide, because we have checked the China's February PMI, and in the PMI index, the raw material price index and the finished products price index both surged 10 percentage points compared to January. So if the government continue to look at this important manufacturing index to think about what's this next movement, I definitely think they're gonna have further movements on controlling the price stability, especially for raw material for the commodity market.
Right. And anything that you would like to highlight on the new VAT policy changes that Chinese government has made on ferrous scrap?
Yeah. Okay. So for the scrap policies, the number 40 policy that's currently is actually taking effect from March 1st in the renewable resources industry. We believe the government's intention is to help to better support the scrap recycling sector as part of its low emission steel making plans. But according to our calculation, after implementing this new tax policy, for steel mills, their scrap procurement cost will the tax payment will be increased by about 1.5% to 2%, and this because of the cost increase, and because Chinese steel mills, they hold large price bargaining powers over scrap purchase. So to control their costs, they may squeeze their scrap purchasing price. So in the long term, they may have this policy may surprise actually the scrap, may decrease the scrap marketing price in the long term.
China adopted a policy of exporting value-added steel, but of late it has been very active in Southeast Asian market with commodity grades. So, I mean, would you like to comment on the balance going forward in this particular year?
For what's common for what?
China had adopted a policy of putting more emphasis on value-added exports, but of late it has been very active in the Southeast Asian market with commodity grade exports. So, I mean, what is the outlook on the balance between value-added and commercial grade in 2022?
I think the reason why we have promoted the value-added products is not semi product. Is how do you say? It doesn't involve a lot of technologies, but produce a lot of emissions. But for the value-added products, that is the first they can drive up the profit margins, and then it's also have promoted the technology revolution in the steel industry. So I think the government will continue to promote this act, and to reach the balance, actually, I think it needs a long, it still takes time to see which is the balance or what's the level for their perfect balance to see what the value-added products import and export.
Yeah, so I mean, what is the time span within which commercial grades could be phased out? 3 year, 5 year?
Safely to say probably 5 year, but yeah.
Yeah, you did speak a lot about the property market, but still, I would like to ask you. I mean, what is the outlook on growth? I mean, are investors coming back big time? What sort of growth are you looking at in 2022? And at the same time, what is the share? What is the share of the realty and construction segment as a downstream user in steel demand? I think it is a whopping share. If you could quantify that.
Okay, so actually, I just recently did a project on the steel demand from downstream sectors, and they separated into 7 industries, including real estate and infrastructure and etc. The manufacturing factories, and from our research on the past 20 years of China's steel demand share through these sectors, the steel demand from real estate definitely is the biggest. This ranges from 45% to 55%, and the 55% it occurs in the from 2000, from the year 2000 to I think probably 2008 or 2009. But and then it regularly decreased, and right now currently I think it takes up about 45%, and for the infrastructure it's about 13 to 50% for the steel demand. So I was saying that because there's the large investments was put into the infrastructure industry, and we think the steel demand gonna rise because of this investment pooling. But whether the steel demand increase can offset the real estate steel demand decrease, I personally believe is very hard because of the number difference is from 45%, whether the 30% steel demand increase will offset the 45% steel demand decreased from this sector. I think is quite difficult, but the numbers is showing the proportion is we are definitely sure is in this proportion. Yes.
I have another question. Now, how aggressively are mills looking at the EAF route, electric arc furnace route in China at present? I think you did mention in your presentation is 12% at present. But how will the EAF balance play out by 2030 when carbon peaking is aimed at? And also, are there any challenges the country is facing in reaching carbon goal commitments?
Firstly, in 2020, the EAF steel output they occupies about 10%. I remember it's like 9.8% of the total crude steel output. And when they are drawing this policy about rising the EAF crude steel output in 2025, actually they say that the minimum increase will be 15%. They expect it to be 15% to 20%. So because it was released in 2020 and we checked the EAF is like 10%, the EAF steel output, and in 2021 the EAF steel output is about 11.1%. So we expect if the growth rate stays stable, then in 2025 it will reach 15% instead of 20%. And I think their goal to reach like the EAF, like between the balance of BF and the EAF is in 2040, I remember is correct, it's like the EAF will contribute about like 40 to 50% of the crude steel output. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. You want to ask anything?
No, I
Yeah.
think I'm all done from my end.
I have another question.
Okay.
That is, there was an article recently which suggested that there is a 50 million ton HRC capacity expansion in China happening in 2022. Does this imply a shift in demand from construction to manufacturing oriented segments?
I think it's also, I think it's implied to the manufacturing sector, of course. And if whether it's into the automobile or like shipbuilding sector remains to be seen, because also there's still demand from the energy sector, and maybe we expect there will be still demand increase in the energy sector. And also if we are thinking about the military and the space, how do you say, the space projects still demand, we think this one is also implied into these sectors as well.
One last question from my side. I mean, we can't ignore the geopolitical tensions at present, I mean, that we're reading about at present. So is that having any kind of an impact on China's dry bulk cargo trade? Will iron ore be impacted in any way going forward?
For sure, yes, because before 2020 or 2021, we didn't the dry bulk market didn't have like a large relevance with the China's government policy, because it's depends on both seaborne, it's based on both like ex-China markets and also the Chinese market. But in 2021, we have seen that the governments, when they are trying to have policies impact, especially they just take measures on in the last 3 months of 2021, we have seen large impact of these policies on whether like dry bulk markets, the price or the production, and also I think the consumption is another thing to say. But on both these two, the production and also the price, it has large impact. So I think moving forward, the government, if they are seeing any more surges or like speculative movements in these dry bulk markets, they will definitely take measures, and these measures will be like how they say, it will be powerful to the market.
Mr. Lee, would you like to add anything?
I think for the moment I don't have any question.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks for the meeting. If you any of you have any more questions, like Mr. Lee or Ms. Nisha, can forward the questions to me. Yeah.
We certainly have many more questions, but then we are facing time constraints, so we'll have to bring the session to a close. But I think that was a very enlightening session on China. We covered a gamut of topics, and I'm sure our viewers benefited immensely from hearing what Jing had to say. Before we end the session, we would like to extend our gratitude to the Ministry of Steel and the Indian Steel Association for their valuable support. Thank you to our sponsors, NMDC, JSW Steel, and Tata Steel once again. And thank you to Jing and Arthur for giving us your valuable time.